Hello, and welcome to the Hobo CEO podcast, where we're talking all things business and entrepreneurship, including the highs and lows, with a sprinkle of neurodiversity for good measure. I'm your host, Shae, neurodivergent serial entrepreneur, personal and business coach, author, researcher, and most importantly, a mother to one beautiful little human being. This podcast is all about sharing the entrepreneurial journey, as well as tips, tricks, and advice from my guests to help you become the business owner and entrepreneur you've always imagined you could be. And you definitely can be that person. But before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the beautiful lands on which I live and work, the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and to all First Nations people that are listening today. So let's get started. I'm so thrilled to have Marnie on the show with us today from Fempire, who is an amazing coach, but also for me, a huge mentor of mine. And I'm so privileged to have come across Marnie in the last 6 months in my business journey of transitioning from a not-for-profit social enterprise into a for-purpose company. So welcome to the show, Marnie.
Thanks, Shae. It's really beautiful being here.
As I was saying, it's been such an honour really to have met you and to have been able to be welcomed into the Fempire and the sisterhood of supporting each other. And I think the last 7 years has been quite lonely in a lot of ways as a business owner. Even though I had a board around me and I've had lots of volunteers, there hasn't been a real connection with other women in business that I was really missing, actually. And I didn't realize how much it was missing until I joined the Fempire. And so I'm really glad that you've come on the show today so we can talk about how important it is to have that network of women and that support around us. But before we start digging into that topic, could you just talk to us a little bit about your amazing background? I mean, of course, I was blown away with the Richard Branson story because I'm dyslexic and he's a big dyslexic leader in our community.
Yeah.
But there's more to your work than that.
A little bit.
Just a little bit. So could you please share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I get what you mean when you say it can be really lonely as an entrepreneur in business. And I certainly found that with when I first started my own business, within about a year, I was feeling very, very lonely because it's quite isolating when you're a solopreneur and I started my business from my closet with 2 young children. And yeah, one of the first things I discovered was how lonely. First, it's amazing and you're following your truth and your passion and you're finally doing what you really want to do. And then you realize you get to a point where you're like, okay, now I feel isolated and lonely and I need people to bounce ideas off and ask questions of. And that's kind of how Fempire got some of its purpose behind it but it all started out when I was a stay-at-home mum. I started my working career, as you mentioned before, working for Richard Branson in marketing and sales. And I then went on to work for other large corporates like British Telecom and others I won't mention, it doesn't matter. But I always had multi-million-dollar budgets to spend on whatever I want and, fly wherever I liked and do, cars and blah, blah, blah. So I was living the high life, so to speak, in the corporate world. And I was young enough that I hadn't really hit that glass ceiling yet, but I did know that when I had kids, or I was brainwashed into believing something, that to be a great mother, I needed to stay home and raise my kids. So I quit my job with British Telecom at the time, and I headed into motherhood and gave birth to my beautiful baby girl. Went as far as changing countries from the UK to the US. My husband is American. And I would take the kids to the park and absolutely hate it. And if I had to watch another Wiggles video, I wanted to stab myself in the eye. But I just felt that
hasn't changed.
No. The Wiggles are a great brand, entrepreneurial brand, but no. Mashed potato is kind of my trauma song. Anyway, yeah, so it was a very difficult reality to face, and I was very bored and lonely and frustrated. But I just kept telling myself, this is what mums do. This is how we need to behave and be to raise our kids, be there for our kids. So, me being miserable and not really following my truth all came to a head when we had fires in San Diego. Living in San Diego at the time, and we had the kind of fires that we have here in Australia and Queensland. They're just out of control, devastating. About 250 homes were burned, and we didn't live near the fire, but when you walked out of my front door, you can put your arm in front of you and not see your hand. So the smoke was thick. So I remember hearing on the radio, if you have kids under the age of 1, that might have respiratory issues, you should probably get out of San Diego. So my son was 6 months at the time. We had low-level asthma in the family, so I decided to pack up the kids in the minivan, which, by the way, Shae was another low in my lifetime. Very convenient, but not sexy. So a bit like breast pumps. Anyway, packed the kids up in the van and started to drive up to my friend's house in San Francisco. It was in the middle of the night because that's, when the kids had slept and I hadn't slept for years. So I was happy driving through the night. And I saw, as I went through LA, fires on the ridge, on the hill, because LA were having horrendous fires as well. And I was driving along in this 10-lane freeway, and the kids were asleep in the back, and my vision started to go. And I had no idea what was happening. I thought it was food poisoning. My stomach was upset. I could see shapes flying past. And sort of of course, who were the first people I thought of? And that's my 2 kids in the back. So I'm like, okay, well, I just have to get my kids to the side of the road. And I don't know if my vision, my thinking was that clear, but, I just put my indicator on and started to gradually move over with horns. And it's all very blurry now, to be honest, but made it to the side of the road, sort of opened my door, threw up everywhere. And then the policeman turned up in the fire, because in America you call 911 and everybody turns up, and the firemen weren't busy enough, right? So yes, the policeman turned up, firemen in an ambulance, and I ended up being taken off in an ambulance. And as they were loading us into the ambulance, my son was still asleep, as most men are through some major female dramas, right? So sorry, guys, I'm just joking. But my little daughter was there, and she was 3 years old at the time. And I remember they had given her a tiny little teddy to hold on to. And I looked over at her. I was strapped into the gurney, and it's the first time I'd ever been taken in an ambulance. And she looked at me, and she put her hand on my leg, and she said, "It'll be all right, Mummy." And I remember thinking in that moment, what am I doing? These choices that I'm making, I've literally put my kids' lives in danger, my own life in danger. I'm unhappy, I'm unfulfilled, I have no purpose. And I'm showing my daughter how to do the same, which was devastating to me. I thought, this isn't what I want for her. If she'd told me how I was feeling, I'd be like, change, go do something different. So that was a wake-up call for me. And I decided, once I sort of got myself back together, you see, Shae, I'd had a panic attack. It wasn't any bizarre disease that I just unintentionally caught whilst driving past LA. I had a panic attack. It culminated in, starting to lose my vision and the rest of it. And it certainly happened in the wrong place, but it was enough to give me that slap in the face, really, to say, okay, something's got to change. So I went on to start, long story short, I then went on to start my own business. I was in marketing and design, and so I could do graphic design. So I launched an agency literally from my closet. And I built that agency from my closet to a studio we built in the backyard, because I still wanted to be very available for my children. And then we grew it into corporate offices. And then at some point we sold it. And then I grew several other businesses all over the planet, because I'd kind of hit this business building formula that if I just followed the bouncing ball of the formula that I'd hit, then most of the business would be successful. Sometimes they wouldn't, because you can't always predict market conditions, or you don't have enough investment to actually make it fly. But enough was successful that, I got to a point in my life where I was like, okay, what now? What do I do now? And that's when I went into coaching and mentoring. And from there, I remember when I had business coaches as a young mother, I just didn't get the help that understood me. I got help from middle-aged white men, lovely men that are trying to make a difference. But, when you're standing there with kid puke on your shirt and they're telling you just need to suck it up and hustle, didn't really resonate, shockingly. So I ended up sort of discovering that women just needed to be coached differently when it came to running your own business, and that we didn't need to conform to the way our grandfathers structured a business environment. And we needed to talk about things like, how do we manage kids and all these extreme responsibilities that we still have, and yet try to grow these successful businesses? Our failure rates are just massive because we have so many responsibilities on top of, which men just don't have, intentionally or unintentionally. They just don't have. They have other problems and other pressures. And there really was no program and no help, not really out there for women in general, to get their businesses from a female perspective off the ground, still as powerful, still incredibly authentic, but to women. So that there's the women that I started to work with weren't feeling guilt, mother's guilt, God, there's one, or frustration because, people were trying to fit them into a 9-to-5 box, or any of those things, or gosh, I should be raising my family and not worrying about this business passion that I have. So yeah, I launched Fempire after that, and now we train women business coaches like you who have had experience as business owners and know what it's like, to teach a female-focused way of, creating a business that has impact and passion and all of the things, as well as you do it on your own terms as a woman, and around all the demands that you face. And we also sort of show you the sisterhood is great because it helps you to not feel alone and not really think you're going crazy, and just have that support. Like, it's okay. Things feel hard now, but they will improve, I promise. And just a nurturing, vulnerable environment is what women need to succeed. And that's what we've tried to create at Fempire. And I think we've done it. But I guess time will tell. So, yeah, that was a long story, but yeah, that's my story.
No, it was great. And even though you said it was the wrong, getting unwell on the freeway was the wrong timing, it was the right timing from the universe's perspective, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, being in a van was not the best timing to have a panic attack, no. But I obviously needed that huge kick up the butt because I wasn't listening to my inner intuition. I wasn't listening to that higher voice that says, you're unhappy, change, that you don't need to feel this way. I was listening to the collective community of judgment that not only men have for women who are mothers, but women have too. So, yeah, it was. I needed that big scare to actually change, and so I hope everyone listening now takes my story into account and says, right, I'm not going to wait till I get into a scary situation. I'm actually going to change now. So.
Yes, because the body tells us constantly. We have to listen to it.
Your body is your greatest teacher. It stores all of your memories and all of your pain and all of your learnings and all of the things. So, yes, when you're not listening to that, you're doing yourself the greatest disservice possible.
Yes, it's amazing how often it's talking to us and we don't listen. But I was thinking about when you were talking about having baby puke on your top and men telling you what to do. I was sitting there the other day and Ava had weed everywhere because of trying to toilet train, and then you're about to go into a meeting, and I just stopped and I thought, how do you transition from pee all over the floor and then you've got to walk into a meeting and there's crap everywhere? And I think, oh my God, sometimes I wish I wasn't working from home because you don't have that intensity of family life and your office.
Yeah, that is the tough juggle. That is a really tough juggle. I remember being in important meetings and, my kid would come crying into the room. Actually, I'm working from home today, so my dog is likely to bark at any time, but my kids are grown up now. But we just don't. But I think women are great at embracing that sense of understanding that we cannot control everything. Women are more. So if I was to talk about masculine and feminine energy and the energies that we sit in, I talk about this a lot, when I'm speaking from stage or talking to entrepreneurs. Female energy, you got to think about as curved lines. So if we were following a map, we'd be taking the scenic route. We'd be looking at the creative scenic route. And this is in men and women, feminine and masculine. And then the masculine energy is all those straight lines that control that. And we need those too to structure our business. We need that masculine energy. But what you're talking about is just the complete chaos. And that's when we really do have to sit in the feminine and just realize that there is no controlling the situation. The only thing that we have any control over is our mind. And so if we go into that downward spiral of, oh my God, this puke on my shirt or this wee on my shoes and is, ridiculous, and I have to step into a meeting, then sometimes we can bring the humour to it and just realise that, as women, we're doing the best we can and we choose to be home with our gorgeous children. And sometimes we're going to get puke on our shirts and wee on our shoes. And it's all part of life and business. There is no separation. When people say, how do you get balance? I'm like, well, it's all life. It's all messy. It's like a ball of string. It's just in moments. Just separate your moments and realise that just because that moment in the bathroom with the wee everywhere happened doesn't mean the next moment has to be as chaotic and out of control, as long as you put that first moment down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And helpful at all? I don't know.
Yes, as you were talking, and for our listeners, this isn't just a therapy session for me. Might sound like it, but as you were talking,
for all of us,
it was making me think about the masculine and feminine. And I don't know, sometimes I think I'm fearful of sitting in the feminine space. I don't know if it's because I'm an older mum or sometimes my partner will say, just so fixated on trying to get the business up and running really well that maybe I'm crushing the feminine side a bit instead of just laughing and enjoying the chaos. I'm like, no, I've got to get into this meeting. I've got to be, on point, and I can't deal with this wee right now. Maybe
and again, the humour in the situation comes up. So we always have to keep our sense of humour, but always sitting. So you said always sitting in, the masculine. Well,
yeah, maybe I am.
That is, people become afraid of that, and they say, well, if I'm good, you said, I don't know if it's because I'm an older mum. It's not that at all. It's your conditioning. It's the same conditioning I was up against with I must be a stay-at-home mother to have a successful, thriving family. That conditioning says to us that we must sit in our masculine and be strong and confident all the time and control the chaos to be successful at business. And that is just so not true. I mean, there'd be plenty of men out there saying, God, my life is chaotic all the time. The control, we do need a modicum of structure and control, sure. And you needed to just pull yourself together and get on with that meeting and do the best job you could in the moment that you had, considering you'd just been weed on. But it's not, that's a perfection syndrome that you're running. To be a good female business owner or good business owner, I must control the outcome of everything that I do. But I think, and this is a great segue into what we were going to discuss today, which is authentic leadership. You have to, even going into that meeting. So when I would have chaos like that, I literally would sit in that meeting going, listen, my daughter has just wet herself all over the bathroom floor. I just need to take a moment, and then we can move into what we need to talk about, depending on what the meeting was, because I realised that the more I just spoke about real life as a female entrepreneur and as a female leader, the more I would break those boundaries and smash that judgment. And, people judged me, but I had a thick. I cared, to be honest, Shae. It was tough, but somebody's got to do it, right? You've got to sit in there and, in Fempire we talk about having your period and how that affects your hormones, affect your productivity and your decision making, and menopause and children, and all the realities, and unfortunately that women are shamed for in business. So I think to be an incredible, authentic leader as a woman, we have to call these things out. We don't have to make it about us, and we do have to have boundaries, but the vulnerability of being in business and all the chaos that comes with that as a working mother or a entrepreneur mother, or working from home, or whatever your MO is just the reality of life that we've all got to stop burying to sound like we're good enough, because we're already good enough.
At Rethink Dyslexia, we are doing things differently. As a global leader in creating inclusive environments for adults with dyslexia, our commitment is to provide individuals with opportunities to live healthier, happier, and more connected lives. Through our range of tailored services, including coaching, learning and development programs, consultancy, and training, we are helping dyslexic individuals, businesses, and organisations to better understand and support their dyslexic employees. So if you're looking for insights, inspiration, and expert advice on dyslexia and how you can provide inclusive practices and environments, then head to rethinkdyslexia.com to find out more, or book your free consultation today. So how do you, because I've written this blog around managing business with grief, with my mum dying, and how I like the strategies I put in place. And I was talking to my counsellor about how much do you expose or divulge to the community? Like, how do you put those boundaries in place where you're still authentic, you're still purposeful in your leadership, you're giving enough but not too much? It's a big question.
You listen to feedback, and you need to be prepared to make mistakes. Okay, so the first thing, if you're worried, you have an incredible sisterhood in Fempire, so you bring it to them first. You go, am I oversharing here? Can someone give me some feedback? Or as you said when you were talking to your counsellor, so that's a brilliant plan too. Everyone has their own opinion too. So if you're working with a very conservative human that is also afraid of breaking boundaries, so if sometimes we go to our partners for advice who sit in the same energy as us or whatever it is, and they're not the right people to ask, because they'll always tell us, oh God, don't do that, or no, that's too much. You have to go to those change makers, those if you want to be one yourself. So what I would say is ask your close community. Say, does this feel like oversharing? Get feedback from your team if you have a team, and say, here's what I wrote. Is this oversharing? Does it feel icky and oversharing to you? And then and choose your wizards wisely. You've heard me say that before. Choose the people you get advice from with care. And only take the feedback on board. That one thing I always ask myself is this true? When someone gives me feedback, I say, okay, is this true? If the answer is no, then I put that down. I put it down. I'm like, okay, great. They needed to share that, but it's not true. So I'm going to put that down. Or if it is true, what can I do to change or make it better or improve it, or what needs to happen? And sometimes nothing needs to happen. The answer is nothing. Take the feedback on board and just do better next time. Or, apologise, move forward, change, blah, 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 whatever it is. So that's all part of authentic leadership too, is not assuming that you're always right and what you're doing is always correct, but actually asking, getting feedback, but then rechecking back in. This is where the piece we sometimes miss. And that is, just because someone's given you feedback doesn't make them right. So you really need to check back in with that self who does know if it's right or wrong, or check in with others like those mentors and guides that you really trust. And if you can't get clarity because you're too triggered, sometimes feedback can be harsh. And then you really sit in, is this true? God, it might have been Byron Katie. I can't remember now, but look, she's fantastic, Byron Katie. She has that is this true question, I'm pretty sure. So, that's one of the things. As an authentic leader, share vulnerably and then edit if you need to, would be how I would run things, because there are things like boundaries. You can't spray your problems all over people, but you can authentically share how you're feeling without coming across as a victim. You're just sharing. You're sharing how you're feeling, and if it helps other people, that's fantastic.
And that is interesting, because I put something out the other day about going the ups and downs, and there was a quote. And so the point of the post was to come back to the quote and following your dreams and your hopes. And that was afterwards, I did worry, because I don't want to be a victim in business, but sometimes you do want to share that some days are pretty shit. And, you know, there are some weeks that are really shit, and it's
and we just want to be honest. Yeah.
And so it's interesting to feel, and I mean, some people reached out and they were great, and I'm having coffee with them because they're in similar positions. So that was nice to see. But it is a fine balance, isn't it, of not wanting to be a victim or not wanting to overshare too much. And even with my writing, like my mum, she used to contact me and say, you've got spelling mistakes in your socials, you need to fix it up. I said, that's authentic, Mum. She's like, no, when it comes to business, Shae, it's not authentic. If it's coming from you personally, have as many mistakes as you want. But if it's about selling a product or trying to do something, she said, you need to change that and have your authenticity when it's about you as a blog piece or your podcast or something like that. And that was always a piece of advice that kind of guided me with my writing, at least, when I could be me, and when I was the business me, and when I was the dyslexic just me.
And I'm sure you kind of unconsciously probably said, is this true? And is this advice good advice? And you said, yes, it is. It's and then you went on to change. Here's what some people might have done with that piece of advice: stopped writing and stayed stuck because they got the advice. So when I first published my book, I remember this girl got in touch with me and she said, Marnie, I can't believe your book is I just wanted to reach out to you. This is through Instagram, instant messaging, and tell you I absolutely love your book. It's changed my life. It's thank you for what you're doing for women and what you're doing for women worldwide, or some big huge gush. And it was the first big piece of feedback. I'd only published the book sort of a month previously, but she said it changed her life and made her feel like she could go ahead and launch and run her own business. And I sent it and I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll send, because I didn't tell my family I was writing a book, because I knew any kind of feedback, negative or positive or whatever, anything in between, might hinder my progress, because I didn't really want to write a book, but I had to write a book because I felt there was all this information that women needed to know. Anyway, my mum, so I really tentatively, I cut and paste that and said, I've been getting great feedback about the book, and I cut and paste that and I sent it to my sister and my brother, my dad, and my mum, so my family. And my mum got back with an email saying, Marnie, I think this is spam. Oh my God. And I remember, you know how I said maintain your sense of humour? I remember thinking, oh, good. I said, Mum, she goes, this girl has tried to friend me on Facebook and I don't even know her, and I think she's probably just trying to hack into my account. And my mum was new to Facebook and not very savvy. Actually, she's still terrible. But and I said, Mum, no, this girl is a real human. You're mentioned in the book. And she probably was so impressed she wanted to reach out. I said, Gen Wise, they friend everybody. It's not about that. She just wants to know you she's looked you up and wants to know you as a person. And she's like, well, that's good. Now my mum doesn't remember even sending that email, but it was a great lesson for me that, again, we don't need permission from our parents to be good enough, and we shouldn't be checking in with our partners around our businesses. Are we good enough? Are we doing enough? Do we have enough? Is it okay if I do this or that? It's about doing what feels really good for you, like feels like the right path for you, checking in with your partner. Definitely, but if they're ever going to rock your confidence, just stay quiet about it until you have proof that you're a very capable human. And yeah, so where was I going with that? It's all about the feedback we get and whether we take it on board. So some is great and some is just, will literally cripple you and stop you moving forward, which is why I didn't tell my family or show. My mum offered to edit my book at one point. She's a journalist. And I was like, no, Mum, I can't have you do that. I just can't have you do that, because if you say anything or, I'm just going to stop right. It's going to rock my confidence. So, yeah, there we go.
I didn't show my mum my book, and she read it and she said, I said, now, Mum, it is a bit harsh about Dad. She said, okay. And then she read the first couple of chapters and she called me and she said, you weren't wrong about it being quite harsh. Yes. I said, well, lucky he doesn't read, one, because he's dyslexic and he's not on social media either. I said, so he won't ever really know what I've written. But
there you go.
It is good. That is a great conversation to have around our purpose and how we, how do we put boundaries in when we're in our businesses.
Why would one put boundaries around their purpose? Maybe
no, sorry. I should rephrase that to when we're sharing, oversharing, boundaries. Yeah, putting boundaries in, because it is all connected. Like if we're wanting to be authentic, then sometimes we might end up oversharing.
Yeah. I think worrying about that is something you've got to put down. And I think, as I said, just getting that feedback from your community, it'll come and then you'll learn more boundaries. But, coming from any kind of poor me is not a great place to start. But coming from this is my experience and this is what's happened and this is how I felt is a different way to look at it. But saying, constantly complaining or whinging about a situation is not productive or helpful to anyone. But sharing a situation that may have impacted you in some way, where you feel it could help someone, is different. But as I said, reach out for that feedback from community. And even your mum sort of said, yes, that's quite harsh, but she didn't say change it. And then you had to, and then again, it's always check back in with yourself. You know your really what's right for you and your family at a deep, deep level. So it doesn't come from outside. People need outside confirmation sometimes, and we need to learn what boundaries look like. But in the end, it really is an internal job, and really working out what feels right for you to get out there in the world. And then if it blows up in your face, so be it. You were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. Learn from it and don't do it again. And I think that's how we learn boundaries too. I get Brene Brown's work gives great guidance on vulnerability and boundaries, but I do think it really is an inside job. It is looking at that, not being humble and understanding that you're not always going to get it right, but it's the worst thing is not to try. How do we, know our purpose and then finally step into it, whether we're stay-at-home mums or we're leaving our career or wanting to change our career, or, some people are like, well, I have no idea what my purpose is. Well, sometimes we just have to wait until it sort of smacks us in the face with a wet fish. And then, we have a great, at Fempire, we have a great, it's on your website actually, the Find Your Purpose course. You could do that, and that can help you gain some clarity around whether you should stay in your career or become an entrepreneur, because people promote that entrepreneurship's easy, quit your day job, blah, blah, blah. I even say it because I love it. But it's not for everybody. And you have to have a certain kind of grit and a certain kind of mindset and a certain kind of learning capability and passion and drive and all that stuff. You can be the most average entrepreneur, but if you keep getting up every time you're kicked, you'll still get there. But being passionate about something, I'm going to probably rock the status quo, is just not enough. No. You have to be obsessed. You have to have an obsession. You have to know your why. So we were talking before we started recording about Fempire's why being the future is female. I have a deep, deep commitment to that saying, that why. And that it isn't that it's not male. It's just that we need more women out there that have a voice, that have a seat at the table, that, run authentic businesses, that we just tend to bring a different kind of empathy, intuition, authenticity, and incredible leadership when women lead from the feminine, from their authentic selves, not from a masculine dynamic, because we get a lot of feedback saying, oh, God, the female boss I had was the most horrendous boss I've ever had. I think to start with, we're less judgmental of female leadership. So we get torn down a lot more. And I said, what? Because I remember saying to this one, I go, what? The worst you've ever had. So you've never had a male boss that has ever made you feel uncomfortable or small or blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, no, I have. But it was just more shocking to her that the female made her feel that way. And fair enough. But we judge these women harshly. But those women got where they got because they had to be masculine and they had to sit in them. I'm not saying it's right or good. What I'm saying is they were conditioned because they needed to, because they wanted to get to a certain level in their companies and they needed to be very, very masculine and hardcore to do it. But they've been judged harshly for it. However, there are some shocking bosses across the board, male and female, and other, who, I don't have any excuse for. But, so starting a business from a passion is not always going to be the thing that gets you there. It's that unwavering commitment to your why and knowing it in the first place. And sometimes it can be really deep. You have to wait for it to come out and constantly question and explore. And then every time you get slapped down or knocked over or criticised, or the feedback that's, or you overshare and someone gives you feedback on that or whatever it is, you just keep going back. I still keep going back to the future is female. We can't be what we can't see. So women need to step up and lead and be shown how to do that authentically from the feminine, without the guilt, without the shame, without all the stuff that comes with being a woman.
Originally, when I started, and like Daniel says to me, it's an obsession, and it is. Like, I live and breathe this. Like, sleep, I dream about it, I wake up thinking about it. And originally, it was because there was no Australian adult dyslexic voices. Over the last 7 years, that's risen. But what I've seen is the male voice. And now for me, it's like, but where are the females? Where are the female dyslexics? Why aren't they standing on stage? Why aren't they the ones posting all this stuff on social media? Like, it's such a small group of women that are out there at the moment. And even, like Richard Branson's a dyslexic poster person, and like there's so many males. And so now I've like my goals have shifted in a way where it's still around dyslexic voice, but it's like, well, but where are the females? And
let's bring women more. And I wonder if it is that not good enough piece that a lot of women run, almost the majority of us, right? That imposter syndrome, that we can't be seen to be any weaker than we're already seen to be, right? We are naturally seen, from society or conditioning, whatever, to be weak. I'm not saying we are. We're definitely not. We have babies. We're the strongest animals on the planet. It's ridiculous. And feminine energy is powerful stuff, much more powerful, in my opinion, than masculine. But, any kind of vulnerability that we share that might impede our competency, someone's perception of our competency, I don't know, you tell me, Shae, you're really, it would be something that women would probably hold back on. We have a very similar why. Obviously, you want to give women a voice in the dyslexic space and having that piece of, we're not abnormal. We're incredibly normal, creative human beings, and there's lots of men out there doing great work, but that there needs to be a woman first, because dyslexic women can't be what they can't see, right? So you just being that incredible dyslexic leader, I can't even say it, leader, shows other women that it's normal to feel the way they're feeling. And that's what we're trying to do, just at a probably more a different level, is we're trying to say, be that vulnerable, feminine. And by feminine, I'm not talking about pink dresses and high heels. I'm just talking about sitting in your feminine energy and your authentic truth, using your intuition and leading from empathy and kindness, which are classic feminine traits. That kind of, we're really focused on trying to give women a voice in that space, and yours is just that one niche down or across, maybe around the dyslexic piece, which is incredible.
Leaders like Jacinta Ardern have really started to help position those feminine qualities in leadership roles, the kindness, the empathy. And then also I think when to just step down and say, it's not my time anymore.
As an entrepreneur or as a leader?
Or as a leader, to be able to say, I need to change this.
Yeah, when to know.
When to know when you go, I know I've done enough in this space.
Yeah.
Like you had multiple businesses.
Oh,
at some point you knew
to step away.
Step away. And I think that's a really important and strong trait as a leader, to be able to go, actually, it's now my turn to move back and let someone else come in.
It is the strongest thing a leader ever does, is when they understand that they're no longer relevant or their job is not serving them, or they can't instill change or grow the business any further or whatever it is. That for both men and women is a tough thing. But the future is female in that way, because I think it's going to take women like Jacinda Ardern and others to show men and women that it's okay to be vulnerable and to know when enough is enough, and to exit when the time is right, and to be vulnerable in that area and not just continue until, you know, you're overwhelmed and your life has fallen apart. But, oh, my God, you were a great whatever. So, yeah, I think it's about showing leaders that having family values and having and putting those first sometimes, all times, is not a weakness. And some people still saw it as that. Some people still judged it as that, but that's their stuff. Is it true? No. But she was being true and authentic to herself. And how can you not respect that? In my opinion, IMO. I mean, everyone has a different opinion and they're entitled to it. But no, she's been a fabulous leader for women. And I hope when little girls look at Jacinda and her career in politics, that they really don't get caught up in the politics of politics, but just in her leadership as a woman through what I would suggest is one of the most difficult times any politician has had to face. And she did it with grace and courage and confidence and kindness. So that's something that we should all try to emulate in our business and working careers.
Yes, true, authentic leadership.
And I think women are the people that need to show people that, to be honest. I think it's inherent in many of us, and that's what needs to come to the table. So, yeah.
Well, I think that is a very fitting and inspiring way for us to end our conversation today. And I would love to have you on the show again, Marnie, not just so I can get some counselling therapy session in, but your work experience, your entrepreneurial experience is so valued, and it's just an honour to be able to share that within our community. So thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to talking to you again.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Shae, and I would love to come back and share anything that we'll just chat and see what happens.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening. I'm Dr. Shae Wissell, and you have been listening to the Hobo CEO podcast. Head to rethinkdyslexia.com.au to find out more about today's guest speaker. To keep up to date with all of our news, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And if you haven't done so yet, go to your favourite podcast platform, subscribe, rate and review this podcast. Join me next time for another conversation on the Hobo CEO.